I have seen a bunch of posts recently talking about how smaller car brands have been absent in Need for Speed. So I wanted to come on here and make a video explaining some of the reasons why that may be the case. I do not know 100% for sure if these are the actual reasons, but with the research I did for this and piecing things together, I can confidently say that I am positive these reasons are at least a part of the overall big picture on that reason. This video may be a bit lengthy depending on how fast I talk and cut things together, so bear with me. But without further ado, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to go ahead and drop a like and subscribe, and let's get into it. As I am sure we are all aware, one of the biggest reasons smaller car brands don't make it into racing games is licensing costs. To include a real-world car in a game, developers need permission from the manufacturer. This usually involves hefty fees, legal agreements, and sometimes even ongoing royalties. For big brands like Ferrari and BMW, this cost is manageable because they know their cars will be in high demand. But for smaller manufacturers, the return on investment isn't always worth it. If a game developer has to choose between spending millions on a well-known sports car brand or an obscure manufacturer, the choice is pretty obvious, at least to them. Many gamers don't realize just how expensive it is to legally include real-world cars in video games. It's not as simple as developers just picking up a car they like and putting it in the game. Each vehicle requires official permission from the manufacturer, which often comes with a big price tag. When a game studio wants to feature a car, they must negotiate with the manufacturer and sometimes even third parties like rights holders or investors in the company. This agreement can include a flat rate fee for the rights to use the car in the game, ongoing royalties, which means a percentage of the game's revenue must be paid to the car company, and there can also be restrictions on how the car is represented, like no damage models, no modifications like Ferrari, and specific branding requirements. For big brands like Ferrari, Porsche, or BMW, and even Mercedes, these costs are justified because their cars are widely recognized and highly desired by players. If a game advertises over 50 Ferraris, it's an instant selling point. However, for smaller brands with a niche appeal, the cost of licensing might outweigh the potential benefit. Game developers have to prioritize their budgets very carefully. They don't have unlimited money. If they have, let's say, $10 million to spend on car licenses, they're going to invest in brands that offer the highest return. A McLaren, Lamborghini, Bugatti, those will generate more excitement than a lesser known car manufacturer that only appeals to a smaller audience. Smaller manufacturers often don't have the same financial power as major car brands, so they might charge high fees to make licensing worth it for them. But for a game developer, spending a huge amount of money on a brand that only a small percentage of players will even recognize or care about isn't a good business decision. For smaller car manufacturers, such as Renault or Zenvo, the cost of licensing might actually outweigh their benefits. Even though their cars are amazing feats of engineering, they don't have the same mainstream recognition as a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. Let's say a game developer has a limited licensing budget. They can either spend $2 million to license 20 Ferraris, knowing players will love them and recognize them and drive them, or spend $500,000 to license 5 cars from a very niche hypercar brand, but risk players completely ignoring them due to them not seeing them in real life or not even knowing what they are. For most developers, the Ferrari deal is a safer choice because it guarantees player engagement. Players want to drive the Ferraris. Even if a niche manufacturer makes a hypercar that outperforms a Ferrari, which happens all the time, the general audience doesn't have the same emotional attachment to it. Without mainstream recognition, these cars often get overlooked. Game developers carefully choose which cars to include based on what will generate the most excitement among racers. Cars being familiar with players is key. Players naturally gravitate towards brands and models they recognize, whether it's a Lamborghini or, even a Nissan GTR. These brands have been built up over decades, featured in movies, commercials, and real-world motorsports, making them household names. Everyone knows about these cars. But when it comes to a smaller or lesser-known brand, the excitement is not always there. Even if a game includes an ultra-rare hypercar from a niche manufacturer, the reality is that most players won't even know what it is or care enough to even attempt to drive it or buy it. Developers want to create a game that sells, and that means prioritizing cars that get players hype. Big names like McLaren and Porsche don't just sell cars, they sell the dream of driving the car. When players see a game featuring the LaFerrari or even a Bugatti, they instantly recognize these cars as symbols of speed, luxury, and extremely great performance. Even non-car enthusiasts know what a Lamborghini is, which makes its inclusion in a racing game a major selling point. Now imagine a game promoting the inclusion of a Renault. While car enthusiasts might appreciate these rare cars if they even have that version in the game, they simply don't have the same mainstream pull. The average player, especially casual racers, that's what majority of Need for Speed racers are, won't have the same emotional connection to these brands. This is why games consistently feature the same popular car manufacturers over and over again. They are instantly recognizable, they excite players and drive engagement to the game, and they are easier to market in trailers and promotional material. Most people are introduced to car brands through pop culture, whether it's through action movies like Fast and Furious, TV shows like Top Gear, or real world sports like Formula 1. Big brands constantly reinforce their place in automotive culture. Smaller brands, however, don't have the same presence. If a company like W Motors, which makes Lycan, which I guarantee a lot of y'all did not even know, appears in a game, some players might recognize it from Fast and Furious, but it's still nowhere near as famous as Lamborghini or Porsche. Without mainstream exposure, there's little demand to drive these cars in a game. Even when a game does feature a lesser known brand, players often skip over them in favor of the familiar names. Why choose an unknown supercar when you know about the McLaren P1 and can drive that car? Game developers aren't just picking cars based on personal preference, they're making business decisions. It is a business. They are in the business of making money. A car's inclusion needs to be worth the cost. If a developer spends money licensing a car from a brand very few players even care about or know about, they risk wasting resources and losing player interest. This is especially important for racing modes that are online, where developers want to encourage competitive variety. If a game adds a small brand supercar and no one chooses it, guess what? It's essentially wasted content. Big name brands come with built-in hype. When a game announces we're adding a new Ferrari, fans immediately get excited. But if a game announces we're adding some random car that nobody knows, most players won't even know what that is. Because of this, developers have to make a tough choice. Add a recognizable crowd-pleasing car that gets played and gets players excited, or add a niche car that only hardcore car lovers will even know and appreciate. For mass market games like Forza and Need for Speed, the choice is very obvious. They need to prioritize brands that generate them money and hype. Another thing people need to think about is that some car manufacturers partner exclusively with certain games, reducing their costs and ensuring their brand is represented in a way they approve of. These deals made between car manufacturers and game developers restrict a brand's vehicle to a specific game or franchise, making it impossible for them to appear elsewhere. This means that even if a game developer wants to include a certain car, they legally can't because another game holds the exclusive rights to that car. These agreements can last years and have a major impact on what brands appear in popular racing games. For example, a luxury car brand might have an exclusive deal with Forza, meaning they can't appear in Gran Turismo or Need for Speed. For smaller brands, exclusivity can be appealing because it generates their presence in at least one major game. However, this can also overall limit their exposure, making them even less likely to appear in other franchises. At the end of the day, it all comes down to money. Game studios need to maximize their investment, and licensing a small, unknown brand is a financial risk. Until racing games find a way to make niche brands more profitable, they will continue to focus on the manufacturers that offer the best balance of player recognition and marketing potential. And acts like this are not new in the business and racing genre, not to Need for Speed or to any other racing game. For years, Porsche was locked into an exclusive deal with EA, meaning it could only appear in Need for Speed, and for a few select EA racing titles. This meant major franchises like Gran Turismo and Forza couldn't feature Porsche models unless they went through EA. That's more money. Now, some games like Forza Motorsport cheated and used Rough, a German tuning company that modifies Porsches to include similar cars without violating the deal, but that is not common. From the research I did, in 2016 the EA Porsche deal expired, and Porsche quickly appeared in other games like Forza Horizon 3 and GT Sport, finally allowing other players to drive them in other games. Another example is Toyota. For several years, Toyota models, including the legendary Supra, were absent from most racing games except for Gran Turismo. Many fans were pissed by the lack of Toyotas in Forza Horizon and Need for Speed during this time. What was the reason? Toyota had signed a deal with Gran Turismo's developers, restricting their inclusion in other games. However, Toyota returned to Forza Horizon 4 in late 2019, signaling the deal of the exclusivity deal. Recognition equals engagement. Big name brands bring excitement and marketing power, making them the obvious choice for game developers. Smaller brands simply don't have that same reach and they cannot have that same power. Even if a niche manufacturer makes an amazing car, it's unlikely to draw the same attention as big brands like Ferrari and Lamborghini. Developers want cars that players will recognize and actually drive, and also drive up their player count and drive up their sales. It's all about money. Let me know how you all feel about what was said in today's video in the comment section. If you enjoyed, make sure to go ahead and drop a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.